In 1890 they called her a slave, but Maria made masters afraid. While others were beaten into silence, she fought back, turning plantations into battlegrounds and proving that power doesn't come from chains. It comes from courage. This is the story they tried to erase. The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on the cotton fields of Riverside Plantation in the summer of 1890, 25 years after the supposed end of bondage. But freedom, Maria had learned, was a word that meant different things to different people. For the men, women, and children who worked these fields under the cruel system of sharecropping and convict leasing, the chains had simply changed form. Maria stood 6 feet tall, her frame carved from years of labor that would have broken lesser souls. Her skin was dark as midnight, her eyes the color of storm clouds gathering over the horizon. At 32 years old, she had known nothing but servitude, born to a mother who had been enslaved and dying in a system that had found new ways to enslave her still. The overseer, a man named Clemens, rode his horse along the rows of workers, his whip coiled at his side like a sleeping serpent. He stopped when he reached Maria's section, his cruel eyes narrowing as he surveyed her work. "You're moving too slow, girl," he drawled, though Maria had picked more cotton than any 3 workers combined. "Maybe you need some motivation." The whip unfurled with a crack that split the air. But this time, something inside Maria snapped like a rope pulled too tight for too long. As the leather descended toward her back, her hand shot up with lightning speed and caught it midair. The fields went silent. Every worker stopped, frozen in disbelief. Maria's fingers closed around the whip, and she pulled. Clemens tumbled from his horse with a shout of surprise, landing hard in the dirt. She stood over him, the whip now in her possession, her chest heaving, not with fear, but with a fury that had been building for 3 decades. "No more," she said, her voice low and steady as distant thunder. "Never again." Clemens scrambled backward, his face pale. "You've just signed your death warrant, you crazy woman." But Maria didn't flinch. She looked around at the other workers, at their faces filled with a mixture of terror and hope. "We are supposed to be free," she called out. "The war ended, slavery ended, but look at us. Look at what they've done. They've just given our chains a different name." An older woman named Ruth stepped forward, her gnarled hands still clutching cotton. "Child, you know what they'll do to you for this." "I know what they've been doing to us," Maria replied. "Every day, every year. I'd rather die standing than live one more day on my knees." By nightfall, word of the confrontation had spread like wildfire through the county. Maria didn't run. Instead, she walked to the small cabin she shared with 5 other families and began to prepare. She knew they would come for her, and she would be ready. They came at dawn, just as Maria knew they would. Sheriff Hastings arrived with 6 deputies and a mob of angry white men from town, all carrying rifles and torches even in the morning light. The planter who owned the land, Colonel Harrington, rode at the front, his face twisted with rage. "Come out, Maria," Hastings shouted. "You've committed assault on a white man. There's nowhere to run." Maria stepped out of the cabin, her head held high. Behind her, something unexpected emerged. Nearly 40 other workers, men and women, old and young, standing together in solidarity. Hastings' eyes widened. "What is this?" "This is the end of your power over us," Maria said clearly. "We will work no more under your whips and your lies. You promised us freedom, gave us papers that said we were free, then trapped us in debts we could never repay, arrested us for made-up crimes, and leased us back to the same masters who once owned us. This ends today. Colonel Harrington spurred his horse forward. You ungrateful wretches, I've given you work, shelter, food. You've given us nothing but misery, interrupted an old man named Solomon, stepping up beside Maria. My grandson was arrested for vagrancy last month, arrested for walking down the road, and now he's in your mine, working in chains. Tell me how that's different from slavery. The crowd of workers murmured in agreement, their courage growing with each passing moment. This is insurrection, Hastings said, raising his rifle. Stand down, or we'll put you all down. Maria took another step forward, positioning herself between the armed men and her people. Then you'll have to start with me. But know this, the world is watching. There are newspapers in the north, organizations fighting for our rights. You kill us here today, and our story will spread. Maybe you'll win this fight, but you'll lose the war that's coming. For a long moment, the two sides faced each other, tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. Then Harrington made a gesture, and one of his men raised his rifle. Wait! A new voice cut through the standoff. A young white man in a suit pushed through the crowd of armed men. My name is Thomas McCarthy. I'm a journalist from the Atlanta Constitution. I've been investigating labor conditions in this county, and I've witnessed everything that just transpired. If you open fire on unarmed people, I will ensure that every newspaper in America knows what happened here. Harrington's face reddened. This is private property. You have no right. I have every right, McCarthy interrupted. And so do these people. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, except as punishment for crime. But I've documented your practice of arresting workers on false charges to keep them in bondage. That's illegal, Colonel, and you know it. The standoff continued for several more tense minutes before Hastings finally lowered his weapon. This isn't over, he said to Maria, not by a long shot. No, Maria agreed, it's only beginning. Over the following weeks, Maria became something she never imagined, a leader of a growing movement. Word of her defiance spread throughout Georgia and into neighboring states. Sharecroppers, convict laborers, and those trapped in debt, peonage began to organize, inspired by her courage. She traveled from plantation to plantation, speaking to workers in secret meetings, held in the dead of night. Her message was simple but revolutionary. They had rights, they had power in their numbers, and they deserved the freedom they had been promised. But the system pushed back hard. Colonel Harrington and others like him used every tool at their disposal to crush the uprising. Workers who joined Maria's cause found themselves arrested on trumped-up charges. Sympathetic white allies were threatened and ostracized. The Ku Klux Klan rode through the night, burning crosses and worse. Maria narrowly escaped assassination twice. Once, a bullet meant for her head struck the wall inches away as she spoke at a gathering. Another time, she discovered poison in her food, saved only by the keen nose of a dog that refused to let her eat. Through it all, she never wavered. She worked with McCarthy and other journalists to document the atrocities. She connected with Northern abolition societies that had thought their work was done, but now realized the fight for true freedom continued. She even reached out to the few sympathetic lawyers who would take cases defending black workers' rights. One evening, as Maria sat with Ruth and Solomon planning their next move, Ruth asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "Child, aren't you afraid? They've killed others for less than what you're doing." Maria was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Every day I'm afraid," she admitted. "But I'm more afraid of what happens if we do nothing. I'm afraid of children growing up thinking this is all they deserve. I'm afraid of us forgetting that we're human beings with dignity and worth. Fear is a luxury we can't afford anymore." Solomon nodded slowly. "You remind me of the stories my grandfather told, about the ones who resisted even when it seemed impossible. He used to say that true strength isn't never falling down, it's getting back up every time they knock you down." "Then we keep getting up," Maria said firmly, "until they can't knock us down anymore." The confrontation everyone knew was coming finally arrived in the fall of 1890. Harrington, working with other planters and the governor himself, declared martial law in the county, claiming that Maria's movement constituted an armed rebellion. Militia troops were called in to restore order. Maria and nearly 200 workers had gathered at an old church that had become their headquarters. They weren't armed with guns, they couldn't afford them, and knew that armed resistance would give the authorities the excuse they wanted for a massacre. But they were armed with something potentially more powerful: documentation of crimes, testimonies from workers, evidence of the illegal convict leasing system, and the attention of the national press. When the militia surrounded the church, their commander, Captain Ellis, demanded surrender. Maria stepped out to meet him, carrying a leather satchel filled with documents. "We will surrender," she said. "But first, I want you to hear what we have to say. I want you to see the proof of what's been done to us." Ellis was a career military man, tired and graying, who had fought in the Civil War. He regarded Maria with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "You've got 5 minutes." Maria used every second. She showed him contracts that were designed to trap workers in eternal debt. She presented testimony from a doctor about the conditions in the convict labor camps. She read aloud letters from children separated from their parents through the legal slavery of convict leasing. She laid out a case so comprehensive, so damning, that even Ellis couldn't ignore it. "These are serious allegations," he said when she finished, "but my orders are clear. You're to be arrested and charged with inciting rebellion." "Then arrest me," Maria said. "But let these people go. They've done nothing but try to survive in a system designed to destroy them. I'm the one who defied the overseer. I'm the one who organized the resistance. Take me, but let them be free, truly free." Before Ellis could respond, McCarthy stepped forward with several other journalists. "Captain, we've documented everything. If you arrest these people without cause, the whole nation will know. The Reconstruction Amendments still exist, even if they're being violated daily down here. Public opinion in the North is already turning. Make the wrong choice here, and you'll be remembered as the man who defended slavery's ghost." Ellis looked at the church, at the faces peering out from windows, at Maria standing proud and unafraid, at the journalists with their notebooks ready. He thought about the documents he'd just seen, the evidence of a system that made a mockery of everything the Union had supposedly fought for. "Lower your weapons," he finally ordered his men. A collective gasp ran through both sides. "This matter requires investigation," Ellis continued. "I'm ordering a stay on all arrests until a proper inquiry can be conducted into the labor practices in this county. And I'm personally ensuring that these documents reach the governor, the real governor's office, not his local cronies." Harrington, who had been watching from a distance, exploded in fury. "You don't have the authority." "I have the authority of the United States Army," Ellis cut him off. "And unlike you, Colonel, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, all of it, including the parts that say these people are free." The inquiry that followed didn't solve everything. Progress was slow, and the systems of oppression were deeply entrenched. But Maria's stand had cracked something open that couldn't be easily closed again. Several planters, including Harrington, were eventually charged with violating federal labor laws. The convict leasing system in that county was dismantled, though it would continue in other parts of the South for decades more. Worker cooperatives began to form, giving laborers actual ownership of their work. Maria herself became a symbol of resistance, traveling throughout the South to speak and organize. She faced constant threats and harassment, survived 2 more assassination attempts, and was arrested more than a dozen times on various pretexts. But she never stopped fighting. Years later, when she was in her 50s, a young journalist asked her what kept her going through all the hardship. Maria thought for a long moment before answering. "My mama died in chains. She couldn't see," convinced that this was just how the world worked for people like us. "I decided that I would die, if I had to die, trying to break those chains. Not just for me, but for everyone who would come after. Real power isn't in whips and guns and laws designed to oppress. Real power is in people standing together and saying no more. That's what I learned. That's what I hope others learn from my story." She paused, looking out the window at a group of children playing freely in the street. "They called me the most powerful slave woman, but they got it wrong. I was powerful because I refused to be a slave at all. In my heart, in my spirit, I was always free. It just took my body a while to catch up." As the sun set on another day, Maria returned to her work. There were letters to write, meetings to organize, testimonies to record. The fight for true freedom was far from over. But because of her courage, because of her refusal to accept injustice as inevitable, the path forward was a little clearer, the burden a little lighter for those who came after. And though her name might not appear in every history book, though her story might be forgotten by some, the ripples of her resistance spread outward through time, touching lives she would never meet, inspiring struggles she would never see, proving that one person standing up can indeed change the world. Maria had fought all the slave masters, not with their weapons, but with something far more powerful, an unbreakable spirit and an unwavering belief that all people deserved their freedom. And in that fight, she was never defeated.